The chamber fell utterly still, all gazes fixed upon the young child positioned in the testimony stand. He was merely 8 years of age, his tiny fingers clutching the timber barrier as he peered at the magistrate with watery eyes. "Reveal the facts to the assembly," Magistrate Sterling commanded, his tone stern and icy. "Did your mama injure Mr. Thompson?" The lad, Jason, pivoted his head gradually toward his mother, perched in the accused seat. Her wrists were confined in shackles, her complexion wan and weary. She had been weeping, yet she subtly shook her head, silently urging him, "Don't fear." Jason gulped hard. He understood the reality. His mother was blameless, but the magistrate wasn't seeking honesty. He was boxing him in and snaring him. I, Jason faltered, his breath quickening as dread seized him. The attorney leaned closer. "Recall, Jason, you vowed to speak the truth." Jason tightened his fists. He had no option, he must respond. Then, in that instant, his thoughts ignited with a scheme, a ruse that would flip the entire chamber into disarray. He inhaled deeply and declared, "Yes, my mama did it." A unified gasp swept the room. His mother's face blanched to a spectral hue. The magistrate grinned, gratified. The attorney appeared content. But Jason wasn't done. He faced the magistrate and added, "And I can demonstrate it." The whole assembly tilted forward. Jason now held their complete focus. What they didn't realize was that Jason had just laid his own snare. A snare for the magistrate. 2 weeks prior, existence was uncomplicated. Jason resided with his mother, Emily Carter, in a modest flat on the town's eastern edge. His mother toiled at 2 positions, one at a pastry shop in the dawn hours, another at an eatery come nightfall. They possessed little, yet they had one another. Then all shifted one evening when Jason and his mother returned from the market. They discovered their flat's entrance ajar, lights ablaze, and the interior in chaos. Drawers were tugged open, their possessions strewn across the ground. Jason gripped his mother's jacket. "Mama, what's this?" Emily's face paled. She advanced warily, clutching her keys like a blade. She inspected each space. Nobody lingered within, but something felt off. Something was absent. Then Jason spotted it. The parlor window gaped, and upon the sill rested a grimy boot mark. An intruder had invaded. Emily summoned the authorities. An officer appeared, jotted notes, and pledged to probe. But Jason sensed from the officer's indifferent demeanor that nothing would transpire. The following day, an even odder event unfolded. Emily received a call from her supervisor at the eatery. "Emily, don't come in today, you're dismissed." "What?" Emily gasped. "Why?" The manager paused before replying. "I don't grasp what's happening, but a fellow visited today, claimed you pilfered from him. He presented evidence. We can't employ a crook." Emily's face drained. Jason overheard every syllable. "Mama, you didn't take anything." "Of course not," she murmured. "Someone's framing me." That night, the law enforcers came rapping. Emily opened the portal and faced 2 officers. One, a lofty figure with a bushy mustache, brandished a document. "Emily Carter, you're detained for attacking Mr. Thompson and stealing $55,000. Emily's eyes widened. "What? I don't even recognize a Mr. Thompson." But they ignored her pleas, seized her limbs, and hauled her to their patrol vehicle. Jason shrieked, chasing them, hammering the officer's spine. "Release her. She's innocent." Emily twisted to glimpse him. "It's fine, sweetheart. I love you. Don't fear." But Jason trembled. He had never felt such terror in his life. That night, he was dispatched to reside with a temporary household while his mother languished in confinement. He couldn't rest, couldn't dine. He perpetually pondered, who's doing this to Mama? Then he recalled something. The day prior to their flat's violation, his mother had mentioned a man who visited the eatery, staring at her, behaving oddly. Jason knew little, yet he grasped one certainty. Someone desired his mother's ruin, and he must uncover who. The next morn, Jason slipped from the foster dwelling and dashed to the eatery. He pressed his nose to the glass, scanning the patrons within. Was the man present? Then he glimpsed a familiar visage, a figure in a suit, seated in the nook, conversing on a device. Jason's pulse raced. He recognized that man from somewhere. Then it struck him. That was the same individual lingering at the chamber's rear yesterday, observing his mother's hearing. Jason's gut twisted. Who was he and why was he monitoring all? Jason needed answers, but before he could proceed, a palm clasped his shoulder. He spun, startled, and met the gaze of a law enforcer. "Jason Carter?" the officer inquired. Jason nodded slowly, his heart galloping. "The magistrate wishes to see you." Jason's blood chilled. Now, poised in the chamber, all eyes upon him, Jason inhaled deeply. He had stumbled into the magistrate's ploy, but they were unaware he wielded a ploy of his own. "I can substantiate my mama did it," he reiterated, staring squarely at the magistrate. Magistrate Sterling edged forward. "Proceed." Jason turned to the attorney. "Do you possess the surveillance recording from Mr. Thompson's structure?" The attorney appeared taken aback but affirmed, "Yes, we do." "Then display it." The attorney wavered. "That's unnecessary." "Display it," Jason insisted, his voice unwavering. The magistrate's expression flickered. "Very well, play the recording." Moments later, the display flashed alive. All in the chamber turned their sights to the screen as the monochrome footage unrolled. A murky silhouette emerged, traversing the corridor of Mr. Thompson's edifice. The figure swiveled toward the lens for a fleeting second, and then the entire chamber gasped. The silhouette wasn't Jason's mother. It was another, someone strikingly familiar. Jason pivoted toward the magistrate, his heart thundering. The individual in the recording was Magistrate Sterling himself. The chamber dissolved into pandemonium. Jason's snare had just sprung. The room burst with clamor. People exhaled, muttered, and gestured at the display. Even the usher appeared stunned. The attorney's face whitened as though he'd glimpsed a phantom. Yet Jason kept his gaze on Magistrate Sterling. The magistrate's countenance froze in disbelief, but only briefly. Swiftly, his demeanor stiffened. He struck his mallet so fiercely the chamber flinched. "Silence!" His voice bellowed through the hall. "I demand silence in my court." The whispers subsided, but the strain in the atmosphere thickened, nearly choking. Jason's heart hammered. Did I just err gravely? Magistrate Sterling turned his frigid, piercing eyes to Jason. His jaw rigid, nostrils flared. That recording is immaterial." Jason narrowed his eyes. "How's it immaterial? That's not my mama in the recording. That's..." "Enough, young lad," the magistrate barked, his voice quivering faintly, but Jason noticed. The attorney shuffled his documents anxiously. "Your Honor, I wasn't aware we had this specific viewpoint of the footage." The magistrate slammed his mallet anew. "It's irrelevant. The accused remains on trial, and this boy is here solely to address my queries." Jason felt his gut twist. He had cornered the magistrate, yet the magistrate held sway. He wouldn't let himself fall easily. Then Jason realized something chilling. He'll ensure Mama's guilty, no matter what. Jason balled his hands. He had to act swiftly. "You said I should speak the truth, correct?" Jason asked, locking eyes with the magistrate. The magistrate squinted. "Yes." "Then the truth is my mother didn't commit this," Jason declared, his voice louder, bolder. "You did." The room hushed again. Magistrate Sterling's visage darkened. "You dare implicate me, a presiding magistrate? You're merely a child." "But I hold evidence," Jason retorted. Sterling's fingers curled over his bench's rim. He perspired now. He knew Jason was correct. Jason turned to the attorney. "If my mama truly stole $55,000, where's the cash?" The attorney stammered, "You don't have it, do you?" Jason pressed. "Because my mama never took it. But someone did." Jason whirled, pointing directly at the magistrate. "And now we've just seen who truly entered Mr. Thompson's structure that night." Magistrate Sterling's lip quivered. He pounded his mallet so forcefully it splintered against the wood. "This court is adjourned," he roared. "Ushers, remove this boy from the stand." 2 ushers advanced toward Jason, grasping his arms. "Wait, no, you must hear me." Jason writhed, kicking. His mother leapt from her chair. "Jason!" But the guards restrained her. "Remain seated, Miss Carter." Jason was tugged toward the exit, his heart racing. This wasn't meant to happen. He'd assumed exposing the truth would compel all to listen. Yet he'd misjudged something. The magistrate ruled this chamber, and now he'd ensure Jason never spoke again. 2 days prior, Jason sat solitary in his foster abode. He'd scarcely eaten, hardly slept, replaying his mother's detention endlessly in his mind. That's when he resolved. If nobody would aid his mother, he would. He began by infiltrating the courthouse, simpler than anticipated. Few noticed a small child roaming. He overheard clerks chatting, gleaning tidbits, but what he truly required was proof. Then fortune smiled. A clerk mentioned the surveillance footage from Mr. Thompson's structure. Jason knew it could prove his mother's innocence if he could access it. Late that night, he found entry to the archives. His hands trembled as he sifted through files. Then, abruptly, he saw it, the footage. He opened it and his eyes widened. That wasn't his mother, it was Magistrate Sterling. Jason's breath snagged, his hands iced. The magistrate had been in Mr. Thompson's structure. But why? Jason had no time to ponder. He swiftly saved the recording to a portable drive and tucked it in his pocket. Now, he just needed a way to unveil it in court. Back in the present, Jason was dragged down the courthouse corridor by 2 guards. "Where are you hauling me?" he demanded. The taller guard stayed mute. The shorter one glanced at him with pity. "Just hush, lad." Jason squirmed, but they were too strong. They ushered him into a cramped room and bolted the door. Jason spun, banging the portal. "Release me. I have evidence. You can't just cage me here." But no reply came. Jason's heart thudded. He understood what transpired. The magistrate was erasing his trail, and now Jason faced genuine peril. He scanned the space, small, with a lone window high on the wall, a table and seat in the corner. No escape. Jason slumped, breathing heavily. He needed to think fast. He reached into his pocket, the portable drive remained. "This is my sole evidence," he thought. But how to reveal it? Then a notion sparked. Jason inhaled deeply, dragged the seat to the window, climbed up and peered out. Below, reporters clustered outside the courthouse, awaiting trial updates. His heart raced. "This is my shot." Jason removed his shoe, wrapped the drive in his sock, tied it snugly, then hurled it out with all his might. The tiny parcel tumbled through the air, landing near the reporters. Jason clenched his fists. Please, someone discover it. At that moment, the door swung wide. Magistrate Sterling loomed there, his face contorted with wrath. Jason's blood iced. "You're stirring much trouble, boy," the magistrate said, his voice low, menacing. Jason retreated. "You can't bury the truth forever." The magistrate smirked darkly. "I don't need to bury it. I just need to silence you." Jason's gut twisted. Then, from behind the magistrate, a voice rang out, "Your Honor, there's an issue outside." The magistrate stiffened, his eyes darting to the passage. Jason held his breath. Had someone found the drive? The magistrate turned back to Jason, his expression unreadable. Then, with a final glare, stepped out and slammed the door. Jason exhaled shakily. He'd bought time, but time was fleeting. Jason pressed his ear to the door, straining to catch the commotion beyond. His heart pounded like a drum. "Sir, there's a stir outside," a voice stammered. "What sort of stir?" Magistrate Sterling's tone snapped back. Jason held his breath. A cluster of reporters found something. A small bundle with a portable drive in it. Jason's stomach flipped. They'd found it. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the magistrate's voice dropped to a perilous murmur. "Retrieve that drive now." Jason stepped back, his mind racing. He'd sent his only proof out there, but would it suffice? The magistrate wielded power. He could make things vanish, including evidence. Jason couldn't just wait. He surveyed the room again, the window too high to scale, the door locked, no vents large enough to crawl through. Then his gaze landed on the seat anew. Plan flickered. Jason seized the seat, hefted it with all his strength, and smashed it against the door's latch. The metal frame buckled. He struck again and again. Bang, bang, crack. The lock yielded. Jason nudged the door ajar and peeked out. The corridor lay empty. The magistrate must have taken the guards. This was his chance. Jason slipped out and dashed outside the courthouse. The reporters were in a frenzy. A tall woman with coiled hair held the drive aloft. "This was discovered outside the courthouse moments ago," she announced into her microphone. "We don't know its contents yet, but sources suggest it ties to Emily Carter's case." Another reporter chimed in. "The court has declined to release surveillance of the crime, but if this drive holds what we suspect, we may finally glimpse the truth." Jason shoved through the courthouse doors just as Magistrate Sterling stormed out, flanked by 2 guards, his face crimson with rage. "That drive is court property," he barked. "Surrender it at once." The female reporter arched a brow. "Court property? Then why hasn't it surfaced in the trial?" The magistrate faltered just long enough for Jason to step forward. "That drive reveals who truly entered Mr. Thompson's structure," Jason shouted, his voice clear, resonant. The cameras swiveled to him. "And it wasn't my mama," the crowd gasped. Reporters thrust microphones toward him. "Jason Carter, can you confirm what's on this drive? Are you claiming the magistrate conceals evidence? Does this mean your mother's innocent?" Magistrate Sterling clenched his fists, his eyes darting to the guards. "Take that boy back inside." The guards advanced toward Jason, but then the female reporter raised her phone. "Wait a moment," she said. "I just transmitted the footage to my entire news network." The magistrate froze. The reporter grinned. "That means, right now, the whole city's about to see exactly what's on that drive." Jason's chest swelled with hope. He'd done it. He'd unveiled the truth. Magistrate Sterling's face twisted with fury. The moment stretched in silence, the crowd staring, cameras rolling. Then the magistrate did something Jason never foresaw. He laughed, a slow, sinister chuckle that chilled Jason's spine. "You think this changes anything?" the magistrate sneered. "You think showing a video alters who holds power?" Jason's stomach sank. The magistrate turned to the guards. "Take the boy and the reporters into custody. Charge them with obstructing justice." Jason's heart halted. The guards stepped forward, reaching for him. The reporters gasped as arms seized them. Jason struggled. "You can't do this. This isn't justice." Magistrate Sterling smiled cruelly. "I am justice." The guards dragged Jason toward the courthouse steps. Then, abruptly, boom. A thunderous blast erupted from the street. Tires squealed, voices shouted. Jason twisted and saw a black SUV screech to a halt before the courthouse. Doors flung open, and out stepped Mr. Thompson. The man Jason's mother had allegedly robbed. But he wasn't alone. 2 senior law enforcers flanked him, and behind them stood a grim woman in a suit. "Magistrate Sterling," the woman bellowed, flashing a badge. "Federal authorities. Step away from the boy immediately." The magistrate's face drained of color. "What's the meaning of this?" The woman strode forward. "You're under scrutiny for corruption, fraud, and evidence tampering." The crowd gasped. Reporters shoved microphones forward. Jason's breath caught. It was happening. The truth was emerging. Magistrate Sterling shook his head. "This is absurd. I'm a magistrate. You have no proof of these ridiculous claims." Mr. Thompson advanced, his face bruised, arm in a sling, but his voice firm. "Actually, there's ample proof," he said coldly, "including the authentic surveillance footage you tried to suppress." The magistrate's eyes widened. "What?" Mr. Thompson nodded toward Jason. "This lad isn't lying. I was assaulted that night, but not by Emily Carter. It was by you." The entire courthouse erupted in shock. Jason turned to the magistrate, watching color bleed from his face. This was it, the moment he lost. Magistrate Sterling, the federal officer declared, "You're under arrest." The magistrate's eyes darted wildly. "You can't. This is a mistake. This..." The officers seized his arms, snapping shackles on his wrists. Jason took a shuddering breath. It was over. His mother was safe. He'd triumphed. But just as Jason felt relief, something unexpected transpired. Magistrate Sterling ceased resisting. He tilted his head slightly, locking eyes with Jason, and smiled. A slow, perilous smile. Jason's breath hitched. The magistrate leaned in faintly and whispered under his breath, "This isn't finished, lad." Jason's stomach twisted. Before he could retort, the officer shoved the magistrate into a patrol car. Jason watched it drive off, vanishing into the city. He should have felt joy, but instead, a cold shiver ran down his spine. Something told him Magistrate Sterling wasn't lying. Jason stood rigid on the courthouse steps, observing the patrol car fade down the road. His hands quivered. He should have felt victorious. His mother would be freed, and Magistrate Sterling was finally detained. But that smile, that whisper, "This isn't finished, lad." Those words reverberated in his skull, knotting his gut. A gentle hand touched his shoulder. "Jason." His mother's voice pierced his reverie. He turned and saw her sprinting toward him, freed from her shackles, tears streaming down her cheeks. She enveloped him tightly, nearly squeezing the air from him. "You did it, darling," she sobbed into his hair. "You rescued me." Jason clung to her. "I promised I would." The crowd around them burst into cheers. Reporters yelled queries, cameras flared, and the law enforcers who'd apprehended the magistrate nodded approvingly. Mr. Thompson approached, his expression laden with remorse. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I was deceived like everyone else. If I'd known." Jason's mom wiped her eyes, managing a faint smile. "It's not your fault." Magistrate Sterling held sway over us all. Jason turned to the woman in the suit, the federal officer who'd arrested the magistrate. "Is he really going to prison?" he asked. She nodded. "He's being taken for questioning. With all the evidence we've got, he'll never judge again." Jason exhaled. It was finally done, or so he thought. That night, Jason and his mother returned to their flat. It remained disordered from the intrusion, but at least it was home. They spent the next hour tidying. Jason gathered his comic books from the floor. His mom straightened the sofa pillows. Occasionally, she'd glance at him, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "You're incredible, Jason," she said softly. He grinned. "I'm pretty clever." She laughed, ruffling his hair. "Yes, you are." For the first time in weeks, Jason felt secure until knock, knock, knock. A heavy rap echoed from the entrance. Jason and his mom froze, their eyes meeting. "Did you invite anyone?" Jason shook his head slowly. The knock repeated, louder this time. Jason's mom hesitated, then edged toward the door. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, "We need to converse." Jason's blood turned frigid. It was Magistrate Sterling's voice. His mother's face lost all hue. "That's impossible," she whispered. Jason's heart raced. Hadn't they just seen him detained? Hadn't they watched the law enforcers take him away? Yet there was no mistaking it. The voice beyond the door was deep, deliberate, eerily composed. Magistrate Sterling was here. Jason clutched his mother's wrist. "Mama, don't open it." She paused, then retreated. More silence. Then, "You should have stayed silent, boy." Jason's throat constricted. And then, just like that, footsteps receded. Whoever it was had departed. Jason's mother rushed to the peephole and gasped. "Nobody's there," she whispered. Jason dashed to the window and peeked out. The street lamps flickered, casting long shadows over the pavement. Nothing. No car, no steps, no one fleeing. It was as if Magistrate Sterling had never existed there. Jason's gut twisted. This isn't finished, lad. The next morning, Jason sat at the kitchen table, staring at his cereal. He'd barely slept. Every creak of the flat, every distant horn jolted his nerves. Had it truly been Magistrate Sterling at their door, or just someone taunting them? The news already aired the tale of the magistrate's arrest. Reporters discussed the corruption scandal, the concealed evidence, and how many cases Sterling had wrongly adjudicated. Emily Carter has been absolved of all charges, the reporter on the television announced. However, mysteries linger about Magistrate Sterling's swift ascent and how many others might have abetted his corruption. Jason's mom switched off the set. "It's done now," she said, but Jason detected doubt in her tone. Then her phone buzzed. She lifted it, frowning, a private number. She answered warily. "Hello." Jason watched as her face slowly drained of color. "Who is this?" she whispered. A long pause, then she dropped the phone. Jason rushed to retrieve it. The line was dead, but before it cut off, he'd caught two chilling words. "I'm waiting." Jason's blood iced. It wasn't over, not even close. Jason's mother stood petrified, staring at the phone on the floor as if it had stung her. Jason's breath hastened. "I'm waiting." Magistrate Sterling was meant to be incarcerated. He was meant to be gone. But somehow he wasn't. Jason stooped and lifted the phone. The call had ended, no trace of its origin, no message, nothing. His mom snapped from her daze and snatched the device from his hands, immediately dialing. "Who are you contacting?" Jason asked. "The law enforcers," she replied, her voice unsteady. Jason sat taut as she spoke to an officer, recounting the call, the voice, everything. He overheard the officer's reply. "We understand your worry, ma'am, but Magistrate Sterling remains in custody. There's no way he could have reached you." Jason's mother frowned. "But it was him. Do you have evidence of that?" the officer asked. Jason clenched his fists. "Proof, always proof." "No," his mom admitted. "But you must." "Miss Carter, I assure you Sterling's locked up. If anything else odd occurs, don't hesitate to call back." Then they disconnected. Jason's mom exhaled in frustration. "They don't believe me." Jason swallowed hard. "Maybe they're right. Maybe it was just someone toying with us." His mom didn't respond. She sat, rubbing her temples. Jason wanted to trust the law enforcers. He truly did, but deep down he knew the truth. Sterling wasn't finished, and somehow he was still observing them. That night, Jason couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, gazing at the ceiling, his mind whirling. Magistrate Sterling had been so assured in that chamber. He hadn't seemed a man defeated. He'd seemed a man anticipating something. Jason rolled over, staring at the window. The drapes were drawn, but he heard faint car noises outside. Then a small sound, a click. Jason sat bolt upright. Came from the front entrance. He held his breath. Another click, like someone was attempting to unlatch it. Jason's heart slammed against his ribs. He slid from bed as quietly as possible and crept to his mother's room. She was already awake, sitting up, listening. "You heard it too?" Jason whispered. She nodded, clutching a baseball bat. The clicking ceased. Silence. Jason's mom tightened her grip on the bat and tiptoed to the entrance. Jason trailed, his pulse hammering. She peered through the peephole, then gasped sharply and yanked Jason back, pulling him behind her. "Mama," he whispered. Her face was ashen. Jason edged forward cautiously and peered through the peephole himself. His stomach plummeted. There, in the hallway, stood a man in a dark suit. Not moving, not knocking, just standing, waiting. Jason's throat tightened. He couldn't discern the man's face, too shadowed, but he felt his aura. The air around him seemed wrong. Then, as Jason began to retreat, the man's head jerked up. Jason flinched. The man knew he was watched. A slow grin spread across his face. Jason stumbled back. "Mama, lock it now." His mom fumbled with the deadbolt, twisting it swiftly. Then, knock, knock, knock. The raps were slow, deliberate. Not urgent, not frantic. Like whoever stood there had endless time. Jason's mom grabbed her phone, hands trembling, as she dialed. "Yes, I need law enforcers. Someone's outside my flat. I think..." She stopped. Jason glanced at her, puzzled. She turned the phone toward him. The call had dropped. A message flashed on the screen. No one is coming. Jason's blood chilled. His mom's hand covered her mouth. The knocks resumed. Slower, louder. Then the handle rattled. Jason's mom seized his wrist and tugged him toward the flat's rear. "Come on," she whispered. Jason's feet barely grazed the floor as they darted into the bedroom and barred the door. His mom pressed her back against it, breathing hard. "What do we do?" Jason murmured. She swallowed. "We escape." Jason's mind raced, the fire ladder. He dashed to the window and flung it open. A cold gust struck him as he peered down. They were 3 floors up. The metal rungs were just within reach. His mom hesitated, then climbed out first, gripping the rail firmly. "Come on, Jason." Jason didn't need coaxing twice. He swung his legs over the ledge, clutching the bars as he stepped onto the ladder. His heart pounded. Then a noise from within. Jason turned. The front entrance opened. A shadow entered. Jason's mom grabbed his arm. "Don't look, go!" Jason forced his feet to move. They descended as fast as possible, metal groaning beneath them. Jason's hands burned from gripping the cold rungs too hard. Then a voice from above. "Going somewhere?" Jason's heart stopped. He erred by looking up. Magistrate Sterling peered over the ladder's edge. He was here, he was free. Jason's stomach twisted in horror. His mom seized his hand. "Run!" They hit the ground, feet slamming the pavement. Jason glanced back once, just in time to see Magistrate Sterling stepping onto the ladder, his face contorted with amusement. He wasn't hastening, wasn't panicked, he was calm, because he knew something they didn't. Jason and his mother bolted down the dark alley, their breath ragged. They'd evaded for now, but one thing was evident. Magistrate Sterling wasn't in prison, wasn't gone, and he was pursuing them. Jason and his mom raced through the shadowed alley, their breath labored, legs aching with fatigue. The city glow flickered afar, but the lanes around them stood deserted. Jason risked a peek over his shoulder. Magistrate Sterling wasn't sprinting. He was strolling, slow, steady, like he knew they had no refuge. Jason's gut nodded. This wasn't ordinary. This wasn't just a tainted magistrate hiding his deeds. This was something darker. "Mama, where do we head?" Jason panted. His mom yanked him toward a side lane. "I don't know, but we can't return home." They darted around a bend onto a busier thoroughfare. Vehicles rumbled past, headlights flashing. Jason spied a law station down the way. "There!" he cried. His mom paused, then nodded. "Run!" They pushed onward, weaving through passers-by. Jason's heart thumped. If they could just reach it, they'd be safe. They were mere steps away when a black car screeched to a halt before them. Jason and his mom skidded to a stop. The rear door opened. A man emerged. Not Sterling, someone worse. He was tall, bald, clad in a costly suit, his face expressionless, unreadable, but his eyes fixed on Jason like he'd been awaiting him. Jason's mother clutched his hand and stepped back. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man tilted his head. "Enter the vehicle." Jason's stomach sank. "No chance." The man sighed, as if irked, then reached into his coat. Jason's mom shoved him behind her. "No," she snapped. "We're not going anywhere with you." The man paused, then slowly drew out a phone. He turned it toward them, a video played. Jason's breath snagged. It showed their flat's interior. The entrance, the parlor, the kitchen. Someone had filmed it. Someone had been inside their home. Jason's mom's face whitened. The man spoke calmly. "If you don't enter the car, something very bad will occur." Jason's whole frame shook. They weren't just hunted. They were watched. His mom's grip tightened. "Jason, when I say run, you run. Okay?" Jason nodded fast, his heart racing. Then his mom hurled her market sack at the man's face. "Run!" Jason bolted, legs pumping as fast as they could, breath ragged. He heard his mom behind him. The man cursed, stumbling. Then another voice. "Don't let them escape!" Jason's chest constricted. More footsteps, more people. They weren't alone. Magistrate Sterling had allies. Jason and his mom dashed into a corner shop, shoving through the sliding doors. The clerk looked up, alarmed. "Hey!" Jason's mom slammed the door shut. "Call the law." The clerk frowned. "What's going?" Then the man in the suit appeared outside. The clerk's face paled. Jason and his mom crouched behind shelves. The man didn't enter, he just stood, waiting. Jason's breathing was too loud, his heart hammering in his ears. His mom gripped his hand. "We stay till the law arrives." Jason nodded, but deep down he knew Magistrate Sterling had influence everywhere, and this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Outside, the man in the suit drew his phone. A message flashed. "Sterling, don't harm them yet." The man smirked and pocketed it. He had all the time he needed, and sooner or later the boy would be theirs. Jason huddled behind the shop shelves, clutching his mother's hand so tightly his knuckles blanched. His heart thudded against his ribs. Outside, the man in the suit stood motionless, just observing, waiting. The clerk fumbled with his phone. I'm calling the cops," he muttered, voice unsteady. Jason's mom nodded. "Tell them we're being trailed. Tell them, knock, knock." Jason flinched. The man was tapping the glass doors, slow, purposeful, like he knew the law wouldn't arrive swiftly. The clerk hesitated, eyeing the man. Do you know him?" Jason's mom tightened her hold. "No." The man outside raised a hand, wagging a finger. No. Jason's gut twisted. Not a threat, a warning. "You can flee, but it won't matter." The clerk spoke into his phone, voice hushed. "Yeah, I've got a woman and kid here. Say they're being followed." "No, the guy's outside." "Yeah, he's just standing there." Jason glanced at his mom. "What do we do?" She swallowed hard. "We wait." Jason wasn't convinced that was wise. What if the law never came? What if the man in the suit? The man turned and walked off. Jason blinked. "He's leaving." The man moved deliberately, vanishing around the corner. Jason didn't trust it. His mom stayed quiet, pondering, then turned to the clerk. "Did they say how long till an officer arrives?" He checked his phone. "They're sending someone, but there's a delay. Busy night." Jason clenched his fists. Magistrate Sterling knew this. It was all orchestrated. Jason faced his mom. "We can't just sit here." Her lips thinned. "I know." She exhaled sharply, then stood. "We leave through the rear." Jason followed as she guided him to the storeroom. The clerk frowned. "Hey, shouldn't you wait for the cops?" Jason's mom turned back, resolute. "Tell them what happened. Tell them we were here, but we can't wait." She opened the back door and peeked out. The alley behind was dimly lit, the street humming faintly in the distance, empty for now. "Come on," she whispered. Jason stepped out, heart pounding. His mom held his hand tight, hastening toward the main road. Every shadow felt like a trap. Every parked car seemed occupied, waiting. They reached the street. A cab rolled by. His mom waved frantically. "Taxi!" The car. "Where to?" the driver asked. Jason's mom hesitated, glancing at Jason. "We need somewhere safe." Jason thought hard. Somewhere unexpected. Somewhere they wouldn't search. Then it hit him. "My old school," he said. His mom frowned. "What?" "The school's shut for the weekend. No one will expect us there. We can hide till we figure things out." She bit her lip, then nodded. "To Lincoln Elementary," she told the driver. The car pulled away, blending into traffic. Jason exhaled. They'd escaped for now. 30 minutes later, the cab halted before Lincoln Elementary. The building loomed dark, the lot deserted. "You sure about this?" his mom whispered. Jason nodded. "Yeah, no one's here. We can enter through the side. It's never locked right." His mom paid the driver. "Thank you." The man tipped his cap. "Stay safe, folks." They stepped out, shivering as the chill enveloped them. Jason led his mom around the structure to the side doors near the gymnasium. He grasped the handle. It yielded just as he recalled. They slipped inside. The corridors were shadowy and silent. Jason's mom exhaled. "Okay, we'll stay a bit, then decide what's next." Jason nodded. His body was weary, but his mind raced. They headed to the library, where the seats were softer. His mom sat, rubbing her temples. "This is mad," she whispered. "I don't understand. How's he out? How'd he find us so quick?" Jason sat beside her. "Mama, I don't think this is just about you anymore." She looked at him. "What do you mean?" Jason paused, then murmured, "I think they want me." His mom's face filled with dread. Before she could speak, a noise, a faint click. Jason stiffened. The front entrance. Someone had entered. His mom gripped his hand. Jason's throat dried. Footsteps echoed down the hall, slow, steady. Jason's blood chilled. They weren't alone. Jason and his mom pressed against the library wall, scarcely daring to breathe. The footsteps reverberated through the vacant school corridors. Slow, intentional. Whoever was inside wasn't rushing. Jason's mom tightened her clasp on his hand. He felt her pulse, swift, uneven, mirroring his own. The footsteps halted. Silence. Then a soft, eerie whistle began. Jason's gut nodded. The tune was slow, haunting, unfamiliar, yet something about it felt sinister. Whoever was there wanted them to hear it. Jason's mom tugged him toward the librarian's desk, crouching low behind it. She pressed a finger to her lips. Jason nodded. He understood. No movement, no sound. The whistling persisted, nearing. Jason balled his fists, mind racing. How had they been found so fast? Was it Sterling or an ally? The whistling ceased. Jason's heart thumped so fiercely he feared it'd betray them. Then the library door creaked open. A shadow stretched across the floor. Someone had entered. Jason swallowed a scream. The figure advanced slowly, their steps muffled by the rug. Jason glimpsed black dress shoes, a long coat. The person paused near the room center, then spoke in a calm voice. "Come out, Jason." Jason's whole frame stiffened. The voice was deep, smooth. Not Magistrate Sterling's. Someone else. Jason's mom tensed beside him. The man sighed. "Hiding won't aid you. We will locate you." Jason shivered. Who was this man? His mom slipped her phone from her pocket, swiftly typed, and handed it to Jason. "Run when I say." Jason barely nodded. The man in the coat sighed again. "Jason, I know you're frightened," his tone almost gentle. "But you shouldn't be. We don't wish to harm you." Jason didn't believe it for a moment. The man took another slow step. "Magistrate Sterling told us all about you. You're very special." Jason's breath hitched. Special? What did that mean? His mom's fingers twitched. She was preparing. The man continued, "You were shrewd in that chamber. Very shrewd. But you're entangled in a game you don't comprehend." Jason clenched his jaw. The man tilted his head. "You unveiled Sterling, but you still don't grasp the truth, do you?" Jason froze. His mind screamed to ignore the words, but the man's certainty, his tone. It gnawed at him. He knew something. Jason's mom inhaled deeply, then lunged. She snatched a hefty tome from the shelf and hurled it at the man's head. The man ducked with alarming agility, but it was enough. "Run!" his mom yelled. Jason sprang up and sprinted toward the rear exit. The man growled in irritation. "Stop them!" Jason didn't look back. He heard footsteps thundering behind. The man was swift, too swift. Jason's mom grabbed his wrist, pulling him down the corridor. "We must get outside." Jason ran as hard as he could, lungs searing. Then another figure emerged ahead. Jason's stomach dropped. A second man, clad in the same dark coat. Jason's mom skidded to a halt. They were trapped. The first man slowed behind them, calm, patient. The second smirked. No escape left. Jason's mom stepped before Jason, shielding him. "Who are you?" she demanded. The first man adjusted his coat. "We serve an entity that handles unique matters." Jason's chest tightened. "What did that mean?" The first man smiled. "It means you, Jason." Jason's blood iced. The man advanced slowly. "Magistrate Sterling was part of something far grander," he continued. "Something you obstructed." Jason swallowed, his head spun. The man smirked. "And now we must determine your fate." Jason's mom's hands fisted. Over my dead body, the second man sighed. We hoped you'd say that. He reached into his coat, but then bang. A gunshot rang out. Jason flinched. The two men whirled. An alarm blared. Freeze! Jason turned. His heart leapt. 3 law enforcers stormed the corridor, weapons drawn. The men in coats reacted fast. The first pulled something from his pocket, bang. A second shot hit the wall near him. The first man snarled, then faced Jason. We'll return. Then, abruptly, he and the second man bolted. Jason's mom grabbed his hand. Come on! The officers pursued, shouting orders. Jason and his mom ran the opposite way, bursting through the school's side doors. Cold air struck Jason's face as they stumbled out. More patrol cars arrived. Officers spilled out, arms raised. Jason's chest heaved, his head reeled. He turned to his mom. What just happened? She looked as shaken. They weren't just Sterling's men, she whispered. They're with something bigger. Jason's stomach twisted. The law hadn't saved them, they'd merely bought time. Because Jason knew, deep in his core, the men in coats would return, and next time they wouldn't falter. The flashing crimson and azure lights bathed the school in ghostly hues as Jason and his mom sat at an ambulance's rear, draped in thin coverings. The night air was frigid, but Jason's skin burned with fear. He still heard the gunshots, saw how the men in coats moved calm, precise. They weren't like Magistrate Sterling, desperate or careless. They were experts, and they'd vowed to return. A law enforcer, a tall woman with dark hair tied in a tight bun, knelt before them, her badge reading Detective Rowe. Are you two injured? She asked. Jason's mom shook her head. No, but we were nearly abducted. Detective Rowe nodded gravely. We're pursuing the men who fled. Our officers lost them after a few streets, but we'll track them down. Jason didn't believe that for a second. Those men weren't the type to be caught. Jason's mom spoke, voice taut. Magistrate Sterling, is he still detained? Detective Rowe frowned. That's the thing. Jason's breath snagged. The federal agents who took him, Rowe continued, never delivered him to the holding center. Jason felt gut-punched. His mom's hands balled. What do you mean? Rowe exhaled. I mean, he vanished before processing. We don't know how or who aided him, but we know one thing. She locked eyes with Jason. Sterling was never acting solo. Jason already sensed that. The question was, who else was entangled and why did they want him? 2 hours later, Jason and his mom sat in a law station meeting room. The coffee before them had cooled. Jason's hands still trembled. We can't go home, his mom whispered. Jason swallowed hard. Then where do we go? She looked at Detective Rowe stationed by the door. Can you place us in safeguarding? Rowe hesitated. We can assign you a secure house, but I'm not sure that'll stop them. Jason tensed. You don't think the law can shield us? Rowe looked uneasy. I think whoever these men are, they have ties. Someone freed Sterling. Someone erased his trail. Someone stalled the law's response when you sought help. Jason's stomach churned. These people weren't just mighty. They were embedded. Jason's mom rubbed her forehead. Then what do we do? Rowe exhaled. I might have a notion. Someone who can assist. Jason frowned. Who? Rowe checked the corridor, then lowered her voice. He was once an FBI operative, but he quit years ago. Said he'd seen too much. Now he operates off-record. If anyone can unravel what's truly happening, it's him. Jason's mom didn't waver. Where do we find him? Rowe gave a stern look. He dislikes guests, and if we go to him, you won't be secure in a law station anymore. Jason's pulse quickened. This was it. They were stepping into something vast, but they had no alternative. His mom looked at him. Jason, are you prepared for this? Jason inhaled deeply, then nodded. Yeah, let's go. An hour later, they were en route, Detective Rowe driving them far from the city, deep into the wilderness. Jason gazed out the window as streetlights faded, replaced by trees and empty lanes. His mom sat beside him, tense. Who is this guy? She asked. Rowe kept her eyes on the road. His name's Dawson. He was one of the FBI's finest. Then something happened. Jason leaned forward. What? Ro paused. I don't know, he never shared. But one day, he resigned, moved here, started prepping. Like he anticipated something coming. Jason's skin prickled. His mom crossed her arms. And you trust him? Ro smirked. I don't trust anyone. But if anyone can decipher why Sterling wants Jason, it's him. Jason's chest tightened. He had a bad vibe, but they had no choice. They reached a secluded lodge deep in the woods. No lights, no signs of life. Just a small timber house with fortified windows and stout steel doors. Ro killed the engine. Stay close. They stepped into the cold night air. Jason's breath puffed white. Ro approached the entrance and knocked thrice. Silence, then the sound of a shotgun priming inside. Jason stiffened. A gruff voice barked, "Go away!" Ro didn't flinch. "Dawson, it's me." Silence, then slow, heavy steps. The door unlatched with a loud clank and opened just enough for Jason to glimpse a man in his 50s. Unshaven, in a worn sweater, sharp eyes flicking between them, his grip on the shotgun steady. "What do you want?" he asked. Ro crossed her arms. "We need your aid." Dawson snorted. "I don't assist lawfolk." Ro smirked. "Good. I don't follow protocol either." Dawson's eyes flicked to Jason. His demeanor shifted slightly. Jason's stomach tightened. Dawson stared at him a long moment, then widened the door. "Enter." Jason and his mom hesitated. Ro stepped in first. They followed. The lodge was cluttered, old charts, news clippings, screens. A board on the wall bore red threads linking names and images. Jason's blood chilled. One photo was Magistrate Sterling. Dawson shut the door, securing it with heavy bolts, then turned to Jason. "You don't grasp what you've stumbled into, lad." Jason swallowed hard. "Then explain." Dawson studied him, then pointed to the board. "Magistrate Sterling isn't just crooked. He's part of something far worse." Jason's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Dawson exhaled, then uttered two words that froze Jason's blood. "The order." Jason's mom tensed. "What's that?" Dawson sat, rubbing his face. "A covert faction. Been pulling levers for decades. Magistrates, lawmakers, law chiefs. They're everywhere." Jason's pulse raced. Dawson locked eyes with him. "And for some reason, lad, they want you." Jason's breath hitched. His mom clutched his arm. "No, that's insane. He's just a child." Dawson didn't blink. "Not to them." Jason felt a cold shiver. What did the order want with him, and how far would they go? He didn't know. But one thing was clear, he wasn't fleeing anymore. He'd fight back. Jason sat rigid, staring at the tangle of red threads connecting names and faces on Dawson's board. Magistrate Sterling's image was pinned near the hub, encircled by photos of strangers, lawmakers, law enforcers, adjudicators. His throat parched. The order, the words hung like a specter. His mother's grip on his arm tightened. "This is lunacy," she whispered. "A secret faction. That's movie nonsense." Dawson leaned back, arms folded. "Films get more right than you'd guess." Jason swallowed hard. "What do they want with me?" Dawson eyed him a long beat, then sighed. "That's what I can't pinpoint yet. But if the order's after you, it's one of two things." Jason's heart thumped. "What?" Dawson raised a finger. "One, they think you know something. Maybe you tripped over something vital. Something you shouldn't have." Jason frowned. "But I don't." He paused. He had uncovered something. The portable drive, the surveillance. Was that enough for a whole faction to pursue him? Dawson raised a second finger. "Or two. You're valuable to them somehow. Maybe more than you realize." Jason chilled. "Why would I be valuable?" Dawson didn't reply instantly. He glanced at Jason's mom. "What about his papa?" Jason's mom stiffened. "He left before Jason was born." Dawson's eyes narrowed faintly. "You certain?" Jason had never seen her waver about his dad before. "Yes," she said firmly. "He's not involved." Dawson didn't seem persuaded. Jason felt the room shrink. His father was a phantom, barely a thought, but now, could he be tied to this? Jason shook his head. I don't care about my papa. I just want to stop them. Dawson smirked. Good, we don't have time for reunions. He stood and approached the board, tugging down Sterling's photo. Right now, we've one edge, Sterling's fleeing. That means the order's exposed. Jason sat up. So we can dismantle them? Dawson exhaled. No, not all, not yet. But we can wound them, make them rethink targeting you. Jason nodded. He was tired of fleeing. His mom, though, looked dubious. This is risky, she said. We're talking people with ties in governance, law enforcement. How do you battle that? Dawson gave a grim smile. You don't clash head-on. You make them dread you. Jason shivered. Could that work? He had to try. 2 hours later, Dawson led them to a cellar packed with gear. Computers, charts, radios. Jason's eyes widened. This looks like a covert base, he whispered. Dawson chuckled. Too many films, lad. He sat at the main terminal and typed. I've tracked Sterling and his cohorts for years. Trouble is, they're phantoms. Cover their traces well. Jason frowned. But they found us easily. Dawson nodded. Exactly. Which means we can find them. Jason's mom crossed her arms. How? Dawson smirked. We set a lure. Jason's breath caught. You mean draw them to us? Dawson nodded. They want you, Jason. So we give them a reason to think they've got you. Jason glanced at his mom. This was wild, but maybe their only shot. Dawson turned the screen. A city map flashed, dotted with markers. There's a deserted storehouse by the docks, Dawson said. Sterling used it for clandestine meets when he judged. My hunch, he still does. Jason's mom frowned. So we just stroll in? Dawson smirked. No, but we make them think Jason did. Jason's pulse quickened. How? Dawson tapped keys. The screen shifted to a forged law report claiming Jason was captured and held at the storehouse. Jason's eyes widened. You're making them think the law nabbed me? Dawson nodded. Precisely. If Sterling and his ilk think you're caught, they'll panic, rush to grab you before you spill. Jason swallowed hard. And that's when we nab them? Dawson grinned. Now you're catching on. His mom still looked wary. What if they see through it? Dawson's smirk faded. Then we flee. Jason's hands clenched. He was done fleeing. I want to do this, he said firmly. His mom exhaled sharply, then reluctantly nodded. Fine, but if anything goes awry, Dawson cut in, we'll be prepared. Jason hoped he was right. That night, Dawson dispatched the fake report. Now they just had to wait. Jason lay on a pallet in Dawson's cellar, staring at the ceiling, mind racing. Would Sterling bite? Would they get answers? Then Dawson's phone buzzed. Jason sat up fast. Dawson checked the screen and smiled. We've got a strike. Jason's mom leaned in. What's that mean? Dawson turned the screen. A vehicle was spotted near the docks. Its plates matched one of Sterling's associates. Jason's heart pounded. They'd taken the bait. Dawson stood. Time to move. Jason rose, adrenaline surging. They grabbed coats. Dawson handed Jason's mom a small firearm. She hesitated. Dawson gave a stern look. I don't gamble. She took it. Jason followed them out. The plan was rolling, but Jason felt a sinking dread. Something awaited at the docks, something worse than Sterling, and he was about to discover what. The night air thickened with fog as Dawson's truck rumbled toward the docks. Jason sat in the rear, heart thumping like a drum. City lights dimmed behind, replaced by dark storehouses and quiet waters. His mom sat beside him, clutching the firearm Dawson had given. Jason had never seen her wield a weapon. It made it all too real. Ready for this, lad? Dawson asked from the driver's seat. Jason swallowed hard. No. Dawson chuckled. Good. That means you're sharp. Jason tightened his fists. This was it. They'd set the lure. Magistrate Sterling and his ilk had bitten. Now they had to catch them, but deep down, Jason sensed something was amiss. The truck eased to a stop a block from the storehouse. Dawson cut the engine. All right, he said, voice hushed. No rash moves. We observe from afar. If it turns sour, we bolt. Jason's mom nodded. But Jason knew she'd fight before fleeing. They crept through the gloom, nearing the storehouse. Jason's shoes crunched softly on gravel. He held his breath. Dawson led them behind a heap of rusted cargo crates. From there, they had a clear view of the storehouse entrance. Jason's gut twisted. A black SUV stood outside, and beside it was Magistrate Sterling. Jason's breath snagged. Sterling looked altered. His usual smug calm was gone. He seemed livid, restless, eyes scouring the area like he expected a trap. He knew something was off. Jason turned to Dawson. "He doesn't buy the lure." Dawson frowned. "He's wary, but he's here. That means he's still after you." Jason's mom gritted her teeth. "We should summon the law." Dawson shook his head. "No use, whoever freed him's likely still pulling strings. To topple him, we need solid proof." Jason's mind raced. They needed something undeniable. Something no one could bury. Then the storehouse door swung open. 2 men emerged, clad in dark suits. The same kind who chased Jason and his mom. Jason shuddered. They weren't alone. Dawson tensed. "That's bad." Sterling turned to the men, voice sharp. "Where's the lad?" One hesitated. We haven't found him." Jason's stomach flipped. Sterling's face darkened. "Then why drag me here?" The suited man swallowed. "The law report said, 'It's a trap, you fool.'" Sterling snapped. Jason's heart raced. They knew. Sterling clenched his jaw, hand twitching toward his coat. "Find them now." Jason stiffened. Dawson grabbed his arm. "We're leaving." Jason wanted to protest, but Dawson's look silenced him. This wasn't a fight they could win yet. They turned to slip back into the shadows and stepped right into another man. Jason's breath caught. The man's face twisted in surprise, then turned lethal. "Hey!" Dawson didn't pause. He struck the man's throat. The man staggered, gasping. Dawson seized Jason and his mom, shoving them forward. "Run!" Jason bolted, legs moving before his mind caught up. Behind, shouts erupted. "They're here!" Gunshots rang out. Jason's mom yanked him behind a crate. A bullet pinged off metal inches from his head. His breath came in gasps. Dawson spun, firing his own weapon. The sharp crack echoed across the docks. One suited man fell with a cry, but more approached. Jason peeked around the crate and met Sterling's gaze. Sterling's face twisted with fury. Then he smiled, a cold, knowing grin, like he'd awaited this. Jason's gut nodded. "Jason!" His mom grabbed his arm. "We have to." A black van screeched around the corner. Jason barely reacted before its doors burst open. More men, more suits. Jason's mom raised her gun. A dart struck her neck. Jason's world slowed. "Mama!" he screamed. Her eyes widened in shock. She staggered, body slackening. Jason caught her before she fell. Dawson fired wildly. "Move, lad!" But Jason couldn't. Sterling advanced, eyes locked on him. Jason's breath hitched. The men in suits seized his mom, dragging her to the van. Jason fought, kicked. Another dart hit his arm. His vision blurred. "No, no, no!" He tried to scream, but the world tilted, his body failed. His last thought before darkness consumed him was a whisper in his ear. Magistrate Sterling's voice. "Welcome to the order, Jason." Jason's body felt leaden, mind foggy. He tried opening his eyes, but the world seemed distant, hazy. His limbs wouldn't budge. A dull hum filled his ears, an engine vibrating beneath him. Then voices. "He's stirring." Jason's heart raced. "Where am I?" The last he recalled. His mother collapsing, the dart in his arm, then Sterling's voice. "Welcome to the order, Jason." His eyes fluttered open. The ceiling was dark metal, the space rocking faintly. He was in a vehicle, a van. His stomach twisted. He tried moving, his wrists and ankles were bound. Panic surged. Where was his mom? He turned his head. She slumped against the far wall, still out. Relief and terror crashed over him. She lived, but for how long? He clenched his fists, forcing calm. "Think, Jason, think." 2 men sat near the front, facing him, suits, the same from the storehouse, and beside them, Magistrate Sterling. Jason's breath caught. Sterling was utterly composed, watching with sharp, amused eyes. "You know, Jason," he said smoothly, "for a youth, you've caused me considerable hassle." Jason glared. "Where are you taking us?" Sterling chuckled. "Straight to the Order's core." Jason's fingers twitched against the restraints. "Why? What do you want from me?" Sterling's smile widened. "I want you to realize something. You've battled something far vaster than you comprehend. You thought I was the foe, the problem." He shook his head. "I'm merely a sentinel, Jason. And you, well, you were destined to be on the other side of that gate." Jason's blood chilled. "You're lying." Sterling raised a brow. "Am I?" Jason's stomach churned. Every fiber screamed this was wrong. But something in Sterling's voice made his skin crawl, like he held a secret Jason didn't. Sterling leaned closer. "Tell me, Jason, has your mother ever disclosed the truth about your papa?" Jason tensed. The air in the van grew heavier. Sterling's smile deepened. "Ah, I see she hasn't." Jason forced breath. "I don't care about him." "You should," Sterling said, "because he's why the Order wants you." Jason's heart pounded. Sterling exhaled theatrically. "You see, Jason, your papa was one of us. A high-ranking figure. A man of great weight." Jason shook his head. "No, you're lying." Sterling shrugged. "Believe as you wish, but you belong to the Order. It's in your veins." Jason's pulse raced. It couldn't be. It wasn't. But then his mom. She'd wavered when Dawson asked about his dad. Had she known? Jason's breath caught. "If that's true, why hunt us?" Sterling's face darkened. "Because your mother stole you from us. Tried to erase your past, hide you from your true calling. And we can't permit that." Jason gritted his teeth. "I'd rather perish than join you." Sterling sighed. "Yes, well, you'll learn in time." Jason's mind whirled. They were taking him somewhere, to the Order. He had to stop them, save his mom. He forced calm, fingers twitching faintly. How tight are the straps? Slowly, silently, he worked his wrists loose. Sterling kept speaking. "The Order is grander than you can fathom, Jason. It commands the laws, the adjudicators, the law enforcers, even the regime. It's endured centuries." Jason's skin crawled. This wasn't mere corruption. It was worse. Sterling leaned back. "But don't fret. Once you see the truth, you'll grasp. You were always meant to be one of us." Jason felt the strap give slightly, almost there. Then a sudden bang rocked the van's front. The vehicle lurched violently aside. Jason's body slammed the wall as it skidded, tires squealing. "What was that?" a suited man shouted. Gunfire erupted outside. Jason's heart leapt. Dawson, it had to be Dawson. The men scrambled for arms. Jason seized his chance. With one last twist, he freed his wrist, then tore the ankle strap loose. His mom remained out. He had to reach her. Sterling turned, eyes widening. "No." Jason didn't let him react. He lunged, snatching a suited man's firearm before he could aim. The van struck something, tipping. Jason felt gravity shift. Everything spun. Then crash, the world blackened. Jason awoke to sirens. His body ached, head throbbing. Smoke filled the air. The van had overturned. He groaned, shifting. Then strong hands seized him. "I've got you, lad." Jason's eyes snapped open. "Dawson." The older man hauled him from the wreckage. "Come on, no time." Jason coughed. "My mom," Dawson nodded. "Already got her. She's safe." Jason exhaled sharply. Relief flooded him. He turned, searching. Where was Sterling? The van lay shattered, glass everywhere. The suited men scattered, some out, some gone. But Magistrate Sterling. Jason's heart raced. He was absent. Dawson cursed under his breath. "We need to move." Jason clenched his fists. "He escaped." Dawson nodded grimly. "For now." Jason took a shaky breath. It wasn't over.